Bright colors, kids playing and adults enjoying the sun. Scenes of peace in an area previously smoldering with gang violence. This is a slice of life from La Compañera, a community in the small Central American nation of El Salvador. As families return, they're using their savings to fix up dilapidated houses, and younger residents are doing small improvement projects over time. But while they characterize La Compañera as experiencing an achievement of total change, the way it got there is controversial. In order to crack down on gangs, the nation's government suspended some constitutional freedoms. Police were allowed to make arrests without warrants, enter homes for on-the-spot inspections, examine people for gang-related tattoos. Tens of thousands were imprisoned, and human rights advocates strongly criticized the government's tactics. But the Associated Press reports that El Salvador's transformation has been radical, with violence in areas like La Compañera vanishing. Will the peace last? Will the gangs come back? These are questions only time can answer. But for the time being, one resident described her neighborhood as in the midst of a new dawn. Next stop this Monday is the nation of China, where a change in policy will likely have international effects. I'm Carl Azuz, and this is the world from A to Z. Since the early 1990s, more than 160,000 Chinese children have been adopted by parents in other countries. This program began under China's controversial one-child policy. It was designed to limit most families to having a single child, and it was put in place decades ago when the communist nation was struggling with overpopulation. Because of the policy, many families abandoned their children, particularly girls and those with disabilities, and many of those children were adopted in other countries. Now, though, China has an aging population without enough young people entering its workforce. This is an economic strain. And in recent years, its government's changed its one-child policy to allow couples to have as many as 3 kids, but that hasn't solved the issue. Last week, China announced it'll ban international adoptions of Chinese children. There were thousands of these adoptions each year before the COVID pandemic. China temporarily suspended them then, and there have not been a lot since. Supporters of the new adoption ban say China is now wealthy and powerful enough to support its own abandoned children. But critics say it'll keep them in orphanages instead of in families. And there are reportedly hundreds of families in other countries, like the U.S., that are in the process of adopting Chinese children. If the ban takes effect right away, all of those adoptions will be canceled.
Word it out. Which of these private space companies was founded the most recently? Boeing, Blue Origin, Scale Composites, SpaceX. The youngest space company on this list, which was founded in 2002, is SpaceX.
Starliner is now over the landing site.
Boeing's Starliner capsule safely landed in White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico Friday overnight.
Touchdown. Starliner is back on Earth.
Starliner is the first U.S.-made capsule to parachute to the ground instead of the ocean.
It was a good landing. It's pretty awesome.
Boeing's Starliner returned without its 2 crew members, Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. NASA deemed the capsule unsafe after a series of setbacks, including helium leaks and stopped thrusters. Now Williams and Wilmore will spend another 5 or 6 months aboard the International Space Station on what was originally supposed to be a 10-day journey into space.
I'm sure ultimately that they both wanted what was best for the interest of NASA and for Boeing and that spacecraft.
Sonny, anything final?
Maybe they were a little bit disappointed that they didn't get to go back home sooner, but this is something that they train for. They know that there's a chance they might stay in space longer.
NASA said it is not clear what the path forward for Starliner is and how soon it could return to flight, as Boeing has spent billions of dollars in contracts from NASA for rocket production.
Boeing is committed to continue their work with us.
Now Boeing will rely on its competitor, SpaceX, to bring the crew back safely when it heads into space next year. I'm Rob Kirkpatrick reporting.
On this date in world history, the U.S. formally got its name on this date in 1776. The Continental Congress wrote that while the name United Colonies had been used up till then, the nation would officially be known as the United States going forward. This was also the date in 1791 when America's capital city was named Washington in honor of its first president. A U.S. rival also got its name on September 9th. In 1948, Korean dictator Kim Il-sung declared his country would be called the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, even though it was and remains a communist country. The DPRK is still the formal name of what's commonly called North Korea today. And this was the date in 2015 when Britain's Queen Elizabeth II became the longest reigning monarch in her nation's history. The previous record of 63 years and 216 days had been set by her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. Elizabeth would go on to reign 70 years and 214 days before she passed away in 2022.
Where in the world? The British government established a colony here in 1788 and used it as a place to house its prisoners. It got its independence in 1901 and is considered both a country and a continent. This is Australia, a nation of 27.7 million people.
Controversy's been brewing in Australia and some other places for years over public spaces designed to limit sleeping or hanging out there. Supporters call these designs defensive architecture. Opponents call them hostile architecture. Armrests and rails, lugs or spikes are strategically positioned to make it uncomfortable to lie down. In some spaces, there are no benches at all. Proponents of these designs believe it's safer or more comfortable for visitors to these areas when fewer people experiencing homelessness can use them to sleep or to stay. Critics say encouraging those homeless people to go somewhere else doesn't address their issue.
What's been nicknamed hostile architecture? Sharp angles and built-in armrests, lone chairs, wavy yellow benches with odd bends. These unique designs dot public spaces in Perth, Australia. It would be hard to lay down on any of them, or at least very uncomfortable to do so.
All the little design elements that we put into what could be commonplace architecture, that actually makes it difficult for people to be there for very much longer than they should.
The problem, some say, is that should is determined by someone else. Len James was previously homeless.
In a subtle way, they let me know that, they didn't want me there. And so I had to look for somewhere else. And that's what it's like when you're on the streets. You're forever looking for somewhere safe, where you can sleep of a night time.
Other countries have implemented so-called hostile architecture too. Some say the design choices are necessary for crime prevention. Others argue that it targets those who rely on those spaces, like the homeless. Figuring out a solution where all residents, housed and unhoused, feel welcome and safe is a hard balance to strike for governments.
Ultimately, homeless people need a roof over their heads.
So what we're trying to do is really encourage people not to just move the problem. That's not solving anything. It's about working with people to try and help them find a solution.
All right, let's take a moment to see who's watching this Monday. First, we've got the Warriors of Red Lake Secondary Complex. It's great to see Mrs. Johnson's class in Red Lake, Minnesota. Next up is Bedford, New Hampshire. Hello to Ross A. Lurgio Middle School. The Lions are watching from Mr. Aaron Darchick's class. I hope I got close on your name. And last but not least, Dr. Haining or Dr. Hanning's students are touring the world from A to Z. IL Texas Keller Saginaw High School is in Fort Worth. At first, the officer called in to respond to a wayward animal in Washington state thought it was some kind of Pokemon. After all, it's called a Kinka, which sounds kind of video gamey. But no, it's real. It's not native to these parts. It showed up at a remote Washington rest stop, and while it is a complete and total mystery how a raccoon-like forest animal native to Central and South America wound up in the Pacific Northwest, the officer trapped it and took it to a local zoo where it'll be cared for. It's classified as a frugivore, so maybe they can give it some Kinka juice. We don't know how it came to miss the rainforest for the trees. Maybe it found them arboring. Maybe it was traveling at night and took the wrong nocturne in Albuquerque. But if it did Kinka choose to live in Washington, maybe it'll find its can of peace there and share its honey bear-leavable story like a tall prehensile tale. I'm Carl Azuz, thanking you for watching the world from A to Z. You are the best part of what we do, and it would mean the world to me to see you again tomorrow.